Our next speaker is Jacqui Pearce, also from DUA, focusing on finds rather than buildings, though there hasn't been a clear separation between the two, working on every kind of pottery from Roman through medieval. Also, I'm delighted to say that Jacqui's just become the PI, principal investigator, on a new project to investigate the Bartman jug, of which we've seen some examples, and I'm sure we'll see more.
We will.
And its international context. So, Jacqui.
Thank you. I hope you'll all excuse me if I sit down, because I've got rubbish knees, and I will have to sit on a rubbish chair. So, can you hear that all right? Yep, great. Oh, where's the Great. Thanks. Right, so what I'm going to be talking about is the sort of discoveries we've been making about pottery over the last 50 years. So that more or less coincides with the life of the DUA and then its successors, MOLAS and MOLA and DGLA, of course. And it very closely coincides with the length of time I've been working on ceramics in London. So what we're going to do is, and I'm going to take my watch off so I can see that I'm not going to overrun. We're going to be looking at some important sort of developments that have taken place over this period since the DUA started. And we are starting where we've just finished, thank you, Gustav, with the London Medieval Pottery Type Series. Now, this was very much the brainchild of Alan Vince, and we've seen some pictures of Alan earlier on. And the idea was to bring in this wonderful groundbreaking evidence that we've been recovering from sites such as Trigg Lane, also Newfresh Wharf, St Magnus, Billingsgate, Swan Lane, a whole series of waterfront sites where we have the timber revetments that have been dated by Dendro. And exactly as Gus said, we were able to use that dating evidence to help us clarify the picture of what was going on with London's pottery. And so the London Pottery Type Series, the idea was that we would look at the pottery that had been recovered from the dumps behind the timber revetments, successively renewed, so we knew the dates at which things changed. But these were all sherds, loads and loads of sherds, and the idea was that we would relate them to the more complete vessels that have been accumulated in the Museum of London's ceramic and glass collection. And we would use the two types of evidence to complement each other, so we would get an idea of what the complete vessels looked like, and we would have a good idea of dating and how styles changed, how forms changed, how decoration changed, the different wares that were coming in and out of use in London. And the first of the parts of the type series was on this particular ware, which published in 1982, and this is mill green ware. First of all, we thought that sherds of this kind of pottery, lovely redware, fine redware with green glaze and a white slip, were made in West Kent. It looked like the sort of pottery that was made down there. But Alan did a lot of digging around and discovered that, in fact, the sherds matched much more closely material that was being dug up at Mill Green in Essex, near Ingatstone. And because Alan was very much into scientific analysis of ceramics, we were able to compare the body of these sherds from this type of vessel with material that had been dug up on the kiln. And that was another key element of this whole procedure, the London Type Series. And these wares, these beautiful jugs, particularly jugs, were coming into London over a very limited period from around 1270 through to 1350. They're very good dating evidence when you don't have Dendro to help you, but the Dendro had helped us to get an idea of when they were coming into London. The next part of the type series, the London Medieval Pottery Type Series, was published in 1985, and that covered what we had identified as London type ware. And that had a longer lifespan in the capital, and it was being first identified at the end of the 11th century, and it goes through into the 15th century and beyond. We didn't know where it was made, but again, analysis of the fabric showed us that the clay was it was London clay. So we knew it was made in the London area, and we could use the evidence from Trig Lane and the other waterfront sites to help us see the different styles of decoration. So the one in the middle, the big one with the crisscross pattern on it, that one is 12th century. And the big vessel on the right, that lovely, we call tulip-necked baluster jug, those are later on in the sequence. Those come in the 14th century, late 13th, 14th century. So we were able to get a very good idea of how London typeware, the pottery made in the London area, had developed. And subsequently, we found that medieval production was taking place in Woolwich due to excavations by Oxford archaeology. And here is a particular favourite pot, something that is made in London typeware. And this was found in the Custom House area. It's huge. I don't know if you can see, it's about that big. It is a massive, great thing, and it's pretty well complete. It's just got one or two little cracks and holes in it. And what it has, the decoration, is a series of leopards. These follow the sort of pattern of the leopard as a heraldic device, as you see depicted in the medieval bestiaries, like this. And so here you are, these lovely creatures with their cat-like faces and their comb-stabbed decoration, and very much along the lines of the leopard. It's such a big pot. Somebody dropped it down a well. I mean, goodness knows what you do, how you drop that down a well, whether you thought, I don't like this, let's get rid of it, or what. The next part in the London type series was Surrey whitewares, and these were very widely used in London from the 13th century right the way through to the end of the medieval period. And there was different industries that we identified as part of this tradition, all using white firing clay and typically decorated with a green glaze. This was published in 1988. Again, same principles, using the waterfront sequence to help us date, and the Museum of London's complete vessels alongside the sherds from the excavations on the waterfront. The first of the Surrey whitewares that was coming into London was made in Kingston area, and there were excavations of kilns in Kingston, and we were able to compare the fabric by scientific analysis with these excavated kiln sherds, and to trace the history of this ware, how the styles changed over time during this period, this lengthy period when they were in use in London, and they were widely used. So you have a large selection of very nice jugs there, all from the Museum of London's collection, and all matched by sherds from the BUA excavations. And amongst them, I just wanted to pick out, this is an opportunity for me to pick out lots of little favourite pots. And there was one particular site where we found these 3 miniature jugs. Now, they would probably be in height about the size of this cup. And they have little human faces moulded on them, little arms. And this is something that the Kingston industry specialised in. They made lots of these little very sweet little miniature jugs. And then there's something like this. Now, this is a bearded face, and it's wearing a crown. So obviously it's supposed to depict a king. And we think it's Edward II. This is the effigy of Edward II in Gloucester Cathedral. And the date would have been right. He died at the beginning of the 14th century, and the Kingston industry was flourishing then. There was also faces like this were found on one of the excavation sites in Eden Street in Kingston, and it looks like the same mould was used for this face on the various different sites, on the various different little jugs that were produced. And here, that's what they look like incomplete. Again, very small, miniature jugs. like the ones we saw in the previous slide. Another of the industries in the Surrey whiteware tradition is Cheam whiteware, again, known from excavations in Cheam in Surrey. Much plainer, this is a bit later, it starts coming into London in the mid-14th century and goes through the 15th century, but much plainer, and we do think that it's quite possible that in the wake of the Black Death there were sort of big changes in the pottery industries in the area, and they were moving far more towards mass production and not spending a lot of time doing elaborate decoration on the wares. So here's a selection of Cheam whitewares. And then the third of these Surrey whiteware industries is the coarse Surrey Hampshire borderware, which was made in the area around Farnborough, Farnham, that sort of area on the Surrey Hampshire borders. And that was it coming into London from the end of the 13th century. Again, it became a very, very major source of pottery used in London by the middle of the 14th century and through the 15th. Much plainer again, very practical, durable ware, a range of different vessels, cooking vessels, jugs, etc. But also some rather wonderful pretty things. And I put this in because the cup at the back on the left, that is a lobed cup with handles all around. It's for communal drinking, and you've got in the middle is modelled a little stag, and around it trees. It's a stag at bay in a forest. The other ones, the two creatures at the bottom, which look like a knight on horseback, that's two views of the same thing. We believe that was probably a gaming piece, perhaps a chess piece. That was made, again, in one of these Surrey whiteware industries. And I just show these together because rather good to see that not only you had the use of animals and human faces by way of decoration in these vessels. We then had the fifth part of the London medieval pottery type series was on something much less decorative. This is the South Herts type greyware, which is known from a large number of kilns on the borders between North Middlesex and South Herts. Different sites. Again, a major programme of scientific analysis and of using the dating evidence from the waterfront sequence. But now for some really pretty pots and some unusual pots. The medieval period saw a lot of pottery imported, and I can't show it all in the time available to me, but I wanted to pick out some rather special pieces, and these are very special. These were all found together on the site of Plantation Place, and they are Syrian fritware, and they date to the end of the 14th century. Imported together, there were several of these jugs which were clearly discarded as pretty well complete or just freshly broken, all on the same site, and they're probably used in a pharmaceutical sort of setting. One of the interesting things about this is not only that they're very unusual, we hardly ever come across pottery of this type, but we can also see something similar depicted in this painting by Van Eyck of the Three Marys at the tomb of Jesus. And there you are, you can see one of these jars very similar to the ones that we found at Plantation Place. There you are. I've superimposed one of ours over the one that Mary's holding. We move on to the post-medieval period, and we were extending the idea of having a type series for London's pottery. We weren't able to use the waterfront sequence for this because we didn't have the dendrodated timber revetments anymore for this period, for the 16th, 17th century. But we still went ahead with the same principles of doing the best dating evidence from excavations and marrying it up with finds in the Museum of London's ceramic and glass collection. And just some highlights from this, we have a large number of these vessels, these drinking jugs and cups made in a very fine version of the whiteware, particularly in the 16th century. And we know from documentary sources that these were ordered from and imported from site in Farnborough. And they came into the various Inns of Court in bulk for the use of the gentlemen of the inn at their various feasts. So we have a large number of these which were excavated and which have a very good history behind them. We also have evidence for pottery that's being supplied by this borderware industry to the theatres in London, and excavations at the Globe and Rose came up with lots of finds of money boxes which were made in borderware, and these were used for collecting the dues from the patrons of the inn. And we also have drinking vessels, and on the right you can see a copy in Surrey, Hampshire borderware of a German stoneware Bartmann jug. So showing the influence of this particular type of pottery on one industry on another. Now something a bit special. This came from a site excavated in Tanner Street. We heard about Tanner Street this morning, and Mola did an excavation there as well earlier. And I can't actually remember the year of that, but this was a spectacular find from that excavation. This is Metropolitan slipware, which was made in Harlow in Essex, and it was imported into London from around 1630 through to the end of the 17th century. And the earliest known dated example, because sometimes they did write the dates on them, is 1630 in the Museum of London. This is the second earliest example. Another imported site, looking at imported type of pottery going into the post-medieval or late medieval, early post-medieval period, is this from Regis House. It's Italian, Maiolica, and it has a depiction of the emblems of the crucifixion. And again, an important find showing the start of tin glazed wares being brought in from the continent into London, and one of the more notable imported finds. This one dates to the early 16th century. We also have some rather wonderful examples of Siegburg stoneware drinking vessels, and well, who needs dated timbers when you've actually written the date on the pot? Like we had with the Metropolitan slipware, we've got the date on this one as well, 1582, and the emblem of the Hanseatic League with the double-headed eagle. And so this is a tall stein or cylindrical drinking vessel in Siegburg stoneware, which is coming into London from the 14th century onwards. And now we come round to, Vanessa did mention this, bearded man, the bearded man. These are known as the Bartmann jugs and have been known as Bellarmines. We prefer not to use that term. It has various problems associated with it. And these are made in Germany. This is Cologne stoneware, and this dates to the early 16th century. And really, truly, those of you who knew him, the one at the back, the big one, it's Jeff Egan, isn't it? It's lovely, smiley Jeff Egan one. And these are very elaborately decorated at this period. And there's an example from one of the sites in Magdalen Street in Southwark. There's another Cologne stoneware Bartmann jug face. I'm just very fond of that particular one. I like that sherd. And here is probably the way that most of us will encounter these and know them best, the Bartmann. This is Frechen stoneware. Again, this is one of the major Rhenish centres that were producing this ware. And this is coming into London from the middle of the 16th century and through the 17th. And as Vanessa said, Mola has been very fortunate in securing a major grant from AHRC in collaboration with German colleagues and the DFG, which is the German equivalent. And we have a 3-year project to examine the global impact of the Bartmann jug, looking at it in the context of an import in a major centre like London. And Vanessa is involved in this project as well, looking at the archive front and the records for the importation of this ware into London. And this is going to be, we've just started at the beginning of this year to look at this project, and you will have to keep your eyes open because there'll be a lot more appearing on this. There's going to be a major crowdsourced website that people can access, and publications and so on and so forth. Some further imports. This is a rather nice one. I just like this because I do like these depictions of Adam and Eve. And this is Werra stoneware from North Germany. And very often we are lucky to find these with dates. This one doesn't have a date, but it does have this wonderful depiction of Adam and Eve and the serpent. And they've both got fig leaves as well, as you can see. So the temptation has taken place. Some more rather nice imports. This is Saintonge ware from southwest France. And this is coming through from the medieval, the sort of later medieval period into London, and it continues into the 16th century. And what you can see there, the complete vessel, is a chafing dish used for warming or cooking food. And very often what they have is these little modelled faces applied around the vessels. So I included these because I think this is one of the more appealing imports that we get. It's not very common, not compared with Frechen stoneware. And this, now that's not a terribly good photograph at the moment, but I can show you something slightly better in a minute. This plate came from excavations in Blackfriars, and it was been written up by Lynn Blackmore, and it is made in ware, what we call Palissy type ware. Bernard Palissy produced beautiful quality pottery in the Loire Valley in the 16th century, and this is, we believe, is a late 16th century plate, and it depicts, and this is reversed it, but this is slightly bit more detail. It's the other way around. You can see that in the slide I showed you before, but you've got Minerva and Cupid in this particular plate, so you've got this wonderful classical decoration here. Some more imported wares from this period, and the imports are all very nice and colourful. These are Italian, from Montelupo, and you have a lovely variety of very colourful floral decoration and figures of cavaliers and so on. And these turn up on sites in the late 16th and 17th century. Particularly find them along waterfront sites in Southwark, Bermondsey, and on the north bank of the Thames. And here's another Italian vessel, and this one is rather crudely painted. This is from Liguria in northern Italy, a typical type of decoration for that. I don't quite know what this person is doing, but, well, and then there's a slightly rather better painted example with a beautiful scene, I think, hunting going on here. You've got the dogs and 3 dogs visible there and somebody off hunting. Northern Italian decoration as well. So some rather nice examples of Italian ceramics. At the same time, we're getting imported wares from China coming into London from the end of the 16th century. And this from Paternoster Square. This is Chinese porcelain of the late Ming period. So the Ming dynasty came to an end in 1644. And so this predates that. You've got mandarin ducks and a stork depicted on this. And that inspired potters in various different European centres to do similar sorts of decoration. And here we have a wonderful example of an excavated plate from Southwark, where you've got, this is a North Italian again, and you've got the idea of the late Ming decoration, but they've added colour to it. It's not just blue and white. They've divided the decoration up just as the Chinese would have done, but then they've also added colour. And so there's a detail of this hare leaping through the landscape. And this is extremely unusual. This is Persian porcelain from Iran, and you hardly ever get this. But I love this. It looks like a 3-legged animal, but it's actually got its back legs sort of dangling in the air. But it's a deer, and again, it's copying Chinese late Ming decoration, but it's made in what was then, or what we referred to as Persia at the time. Now, what about making beautiful decorative pottery in this country? Now, this is the first examples of Tinglaze wares to be made in London, and this is from Aldgate, and excavations in Holy Trinity Priory brought up wasters from the first pothouse dated to the 1570s in Aldgate area. So here's some examples of the kind of pottery that was being made in that pothouse, and which is, again, Lynn Blackmore has written these up. Going through into the early 17th century, we've got, again, the tin glaze industry, a growing number of sites making it, and they're, again, inspired by Chinese porcelain. And I can remember that bottle jug on the left coming up from Westminster Underground Station. It was brought in by a carrier bag by one of the diggers, and he said, "Is this any good?" They put this out on the table for us, and we said, "Yes, it is." And I put this in because I just love this sort of rather loopy-looking cat, the excavated one. I think that was from one of the theatre sites. And the cats, they're not very common, but they did actually appear in brothels. These were used as signs in cat houses. Again, this is a site in Southwark where these all came from one particular feature, a well on the site, and these were reconstructed. These are mid to late 17th century Tinglaze wares. And this, again, this is from Chaucer House in Southwark, and this clearly was commissioned, a miller and his mill, late 17th century, and some late 17th century Chinese-inspired wares, which we know were in circulation between 1670 and 1690. Somebody's written the date on one of these sherds, but we think they got the date wrong. They put 08 instead of 80. And there's that. There's that. I mean, I'm sure this is from Paternoster Square, used for drinking games, I believe. And this is a strange thing. When we first found this, we wondered what the decoration meant. In fact, what it is this. It's Hebrew, the word for milk, and it's from Mitre Square, and it's used for the separation in Jewish religious law of meat and dairy produce. Excavations on the first attempts at making stoneware in this country successfully in Fulham. These were carried out by Chris Green. These weren't carried out by the DUA, but they are very important, and so are these. These were made in the Fulham pothouse, and the large sherd is a copy of one of these stoneware vessels. Just have a very quick run through of groups as a whole. And this is the clearance group, the notion of the clearance group. This is Crosswell, excavated in 79, and all of these came from a cesspit, and they were very closely dated. They seem to have been discarded at the same period. Another example was in Uxbridge, on the site of the King's Arms Inn, and they produced pottery that was chucked down the well on the site of the inn. All these beautiful, reconstructible creamware sauce boats and English porcelain. And this is an opportunity for us to start looking at which of the different factories involved and to get more deeply into the kind of wares that were being produced in the 18th century and in the 19th century. And then excavations on production sites. This one here in Bow, this was excavated as a joint excavation between Molas and PCA, and this is the Bow Porcelain Factory, which was operating from 1747 onwards through into the late 18th century. We had a whole load of kiln furniture. We had loads of beautiful pottery, the blue and white wares copying the Chinese, plain white wares copying Chinese, and all sorts of beautiful enamelled decoration and figures, all excavated on this one particular site. Beautiful to get an opportunity to do that, and to finish with just one site that we used as a sort of means for working with citizen scientists, the Moeller Academy of Archaeological Specialist Training, looking back at an excavation that had never been published in 1987 at America Square. It belonged to the Danish consul who moved into the site in America Square in 1787, and he moved out in 1806. Loads of pottery discarded, which we had the evening class look at. Great dinner services of Chinese porcelain. Beautiful examples of high-quality Chinese porcelain. And English porcelain, beautiful little sauce boat there. And even this lovely teapot. But we could tie it in with an individual, and it was wonderful. And it was this was the research that was carried out by the individuals who came to the class. And that is just a very brief run-through of some of the exciting things. Well, to me, these have all been extremely exciting projects in which I've been involved, and give you some idea of the incredible range of ceramics that we find in London. So thank you very much.